Hey all, it's Coach Akash again. I'm glad you could tune in today, and I welcome you back to another College Factory test prep workshop. Now, today we're going to be covering a lot in this workshop, including general information and advice regarding test prep, testing stamina, how to incorporate progressive overload into your practice, how to study smarter instead of harder, how to review mistakes, testing anxiety and pacing, and how to control them. And finally, we're going to end by talking about test day logistics. Wow, that was a mouthful. Anyway, that's what we have in store for you today. So buckle up and get ready to learn more about test prep. All right, so some of you may be familiar with the term progressive overload as it pertains to working out or practicing your sport. The idea is that each time you perform an exercise or practice your sport, you go a little harder than the last time. You do an extra rep, an extra lap, you add weight, you stretch a little further, you jump a little higher. You get the idea. Well, the same idea can be applied to testing. Now, trust me when I say that in testing, your stamina is just as important as your actual preparation. In the age of TikTok, Instagram Reel, and Snapchat, we are so used to jumping from one thing to another at the slightest sign of boredom. Training yourself to sit and test virtually non-stop for 3 to 3.5 hours is really tough. And that's assuming you aren't taking the essay versions of these exams. These exams are not easy to complete. They tire you out and they test your stamina. And if you don't prepare for them, there is a good chance that you will burn out halfway through your exam on test day. Anyway, let me bring it full circle back to my analogy. In the same way you might incorporate progressive overload while training for a sport, you may find it beneficial to increase the duration or the intensity of each progressive test prep session that you engage in. That could mean increasing the number of problems you do, increasing the length of your study session, or decreasing the rest period between sessions, or just increasing how frequently you study. Maybe 5 days a week instead of 3 days a week, maybe 3 days a week instead of just one day a week. That is up to you and your personal schedule. Okay, so now we're going to be discussing how to study smarter and not harder. So there are a few things you can do to study smarter. The first and most important skill to master to make your test prep more effective is to review your mistakes effectively. Now, what does that mean? Well, you need to reconsider how you react to mistakes. You shouldn't think of mistakes as bad things, at least not until test day. The way I see it, and the way that I would like you to see it as well, is that it is better that you make mistakes in your practice than during your actual exam. Every mistake you make is an opportunity to pinpoint a problem area in content knowledge or testing skills that is personal to you, and to fix it so that you don't make that mistake on test day. This is the kind of insight that you will get only from careful review of your mistakes. So, what does this review process look like? To begin with, whenever you are using a practice exam or a set of practice questions to study, star, or mark the problems that you are uncertain about in some way. This way, it will be easier to figure out why you got a question wrong when you are beginning the review process. Once you have completed the practice material, whether that means a full exam or a set of practice questions, categorize your mistakes into 3 types. Questions that you skipped or randomly guessed on, questions that you guessed on using process of elimination, or questions that you felt pretty confident with during your practice, and in other words, questions that you thought you knew. Now, you want to pay close attention to all of the questions you guessed on and make sure that you really understand the reason why you missed these questions. Now, try to think of how you might approach that question differently if you were to see it again. Let me stress this again. It is not enough to just check which questions you got wrong, read the explanation, and move on. In order to avoid making similar mistakes in future practice or on future tests, you need to make a more conscious effort towards thinking about why you made the mistakes and how you will avoid such mistakes in the future. By doing this, you'll be able to pinpoint repeated mistakes and figure out where you can improve the most. Maybe you are not reading the questions carefully, or maybe you just don't have the content knowledge you need. Then again, maybe you know how to answer the questions, but you feel rushed often and make careless mistakes. This could tell you that you need to work on your timing. Now, reviewing your mistakes in this way is the kind of extra step that is going to help you improve more quickly. Another way to maximize your chances of success is to make sure you are mentally prepared for your exam. Outside of just content and strategizing. This means knowing how to control your testing anxiety. Now, the best way to control this kind of anxiety is to just study more, which will make you feel more confident in your level of preparation. Being honest with yourself about whether or not you are ready for your exam is important. If you feel that you're not prepared, it is okay to postpone your exam to a later date. I myself have done this with the MCAT because I realized I was trying to force it in at a time where I just had so many other things going on that I wasn't going to be ready. So I took a step back and made the decision that was going to be better for me in the long run. And I decided to push my exam back to give me more time to focus on what I had going on at the time, while also giving me more time to study for my exam. Now, if for whatever reason pushing back your test is not an option for you and you don't feel prepared leading up to your exam, you need to stop thinking about how unprepared you are. This is easier said than done, but the best chance you are going to have at maximizing your score is to get out of your own head. You have to convince yourself that everything is going to be okay in the end. You've made it this far, and you have to accept the situation for what it is. Things might go your way. You might get to test day and end up being tested on topics you are strong in. So don't go into your exam already convinced that it's not going to go well, because that type of negative self-talk might even make you miss points on questions that you'd normally get correct. On the other hand, things might not go your way, and you might fall short of your goal score, and that's okay. You should be proud that you push yourself to study and take the test. You can worry about what to do once your exam is done, but in the moment of the exam and in the days leading up to it, you just have to be mentally prepared for any outcome. Lastly, I want to explain something to you called the Yerkes-Dodson law. It has a complicated name, but the idea is simple. It is natural for us to feel stress in high stakes situations. This is just a biological response of our bodies preparing us for the challenge ahead. And a moderate amount of stress is actually beneficial to our performance. So, feeling a little bit of stress during your exam or leading up to your exam is perfectly healthy and might even help you perform better. However, if your stress increases too much, let's say you start getting stressed about how stressed you're feeling, and then you get into this vicious cycle of stress, that's when your performance can be negatively affected. So the takeaway here is that if you find yourself shortly before an exam or during an exam thinking about how nervous you're feeling, just take a minute to slow down a little bit. Close your eyes briefly, take a few deep breaths, and think about how your body is preparing you for the challenge that is in front of you. Now, another important aspect of smart preparation is to focus on your pacing while you study. It is not enough just to learn the content and the test taking strategies. You also have to be able to apply them in a timely manner. So every time you study, you should try sticking more closely to test day pacing. This can be seen as another example of the progressive overload method that I talked about earlier. Now, there are a few ways you can practice pacing. For example, you might consider checking the time you spend on each question as you are practicing. This is good to do during practice as it will give you an idea of where you are slowing down and losing time. However, you don't want to do this during the exam, as spending too much time checking your pace will eat into your actual testing time. Another way you can practice pacing is to keep in mind certain checkpoints. For example, you can aim to have roughly half of the questions in a particular section done in half of the time allotted for that section. This strategy does not work perfectly, but it will give you a good approximation of the pace you should be keeping while taking your exam. For example, for the ACT math section, you can aim to have half of the questions done in half of the time, which is about 30 questions done in 30 minutes. Now, this will give you a rough approximation of the pace you want to be keeping. However, it is not a perfect pace, as the questions in this section do tend to get progressively more difficult throughout the section. The key to pacing is to set benchmarks that are going to work the best for you in getting you to your goal score. Now we're going to be topping off this workshop by briefly discussing test day logistics. On test day, you will need to bring a printed copy of your testing ticket, acceptable photo identification, which meets these criteria here, and you will also need to bring sharpened number 2 pencils. Now, you can also choose to bring a watch without an alarm to help you with pacing, a calculator to help you with the sections that allow calculator use, and snacks to eat during breaks. Finally, at least for now, you'll also need to bring a mask to wear throughout the duration of your exam. All right, I know that was a lot, but we made it through, so congratulations for sticking with me through it all. Now, if you're overwhelmed, I totally understand. So that's why we're here to help. College Factory is offering 3 test prep programs of different lengths, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, and 12 weeks for both the SAT and ACT, and we are actively recruiting new students into our program. So if you have any questions for me or you would like to get involved with our program, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at akash@collegefactory.org. All right. I hope you enjoyed the workshop, and I'll see you all in the next one.